Hello, everybody. This is momentous. It's episode 200 of Walking Dead. Derp. It's episode 200 of Reanimated Podcast, hosted by yours truly and hers truly, Stuart and HA. Morning, HA.
Good morning.
We're not really doing anything with bells and whistles for 200 other than reviewing the end of Kingdom, episodes 5 and 6 of Kingdom from Netflix, Korean medieval zombie show. But hey, you know what? That's good enough for me. But here goes, guys. We got a little bit of news to get to before we get into that. So, HA, do you want to talk about this first one?
I think everybody who listens with any frequency knows that you and I were not really big fans of Z Nation. So, but apparently some people were, and there was a little bit of people. Some people were upset when it got canceled. But apparently, Sci-Fi, or Sci-Fi, as I sometimes like to call it, is planning to come out with a prequel to this show. And you know, I'm like, all right, I guess so. I guess you feel like you got to have this on, but I don't know. I did not feel like the execution of that other show was really wonderful, and I just thought the writing and the storytelling was a little bit lame, but maybe this will be a little bit different. I don't know.
I never bought into the world that they were setting up.
Yeah.
Every episode, it always felt like they were encountering these enclaves of humanity that seemed unlikely.
Correct. And I mean, I think that's part of what
Yeah.
What you and I both did not really enjoy is that, look, I can deal with any like level of cheesiness to some extent as long as the world makes sense to me. And it didn't. It just kind of, to me, a lot of the show felt like they were sort of just improvising a lot of stuff and like, okay, it would be cool to have this kind of an enclave. And I'm just not into that kind of, like, it did not feel to me as if this was well thought out. So, I mean, I'm happy to give it a shot, as I generally am for anything, but I'm not, just because of how I felt about this particular show generally, I'm not necessarily, like, you know, chomping out the bit to see this prequel.
So I wonder if they're going to bring back, what's his name? The actor who I was really excited about Z Nation in the first place. But
oh, you mean the one they killed off really quickly?
Harold something?
Yeah, from Lost? Parento?
From everything, yeah.
Yep.
He's a great actor. Yeah, and then they killed him in the first episode, second maybe.
Yeah.
Because this is going to be about the summer before the outbreak, I guess, or the summer before the outbreak became really widespread.
If it is him, I'm okay to give it a shot. Maybe it was like, hey, maybe we shouldn't have killed him off that quickly, and we should build something around him. If that's the case, I think he's really wonderful, so I would definitely give that a shot.
Yeah.
So we'll see. And in other news about prequels and spin-offs and whatnot, our favorite favorite magazine, Forbes, or online source of zombie show news, Forbes, has come out with an article confirming a few different things. And I'm very curious to see what you think about this, Stuart. But we already knew that there was going to be some feature films and things featuring Rick Grimes. We know about Fear the Walking Dead, and apparently they have confirmed that there's going to be yet another spin-off, though what that will entail, I don't think they really know yet, or they're not revealing yet. I think there was some thought that it might be Maggie.
You saw how this was leaked, or not leaked, but this was in an
Right.
earnings call. Like, this is a guy who knows nothing about
Yeah.
the actual story. He's just like, and in other news, AMC is standing to make more money because we're rolling out another Walking Dead title.
Right. It was done kind of, I don't know that this is what they intended.
I don't think suits are supposed to make those kinds of reveals in earnings calls.
Right. And, you know, I'm okay with them coming out with something else, I guess, but like I do think we saw some of the struggles that Fear the Walking Dead had with their storylines. It's still, you know, we've seen some things with the show proper, and I guess the question is, I mean, look, this franchise is still earning a lot of money, so I guess that they're thinking that this will be a way to have it on almost every week of the year. But unless there's like some solid storyline or plan, I think, to unite these three shows eventually, or to sort of come together at some point, then you just have this kind of meandering thing that doesn't make sense. And one of the things I really felt, especially with Fear the Walking Dead the first season, was just how slow-moving that story is. And then they built up characters and didn't do anything with them and then killed them off. And then as we saw what would happen to the Madison character, which finally we were starting to see something with that character, and they killed her off. And so part of me wonders what their thought is, if they have any, about what this will be. And then there's also the question about who would be the leaders, like who would be the storylines that this would follow. I could see Negan potentially being this, but I think he still has some things to play out in the main series. They're suggesting that Maggie might be doing that, but there's still a lot of stuff up in the air because she's already committed, or there's another show that she's been attached to, Whiskey Cavalier.
Which I haven't seen the pilot for, although people have been, Hulu's been trying to get me to watch it. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, they've been trying to get me to watch it too. I have not. But there's a chance that series has legs, and if so, how is she going to split that time? We have seen what has happened before with the character of Sasha, and we were like, how is she going to do both these things? And then they can't, so they killed her off so she could go be in Star Trek. So it remains to be seen. Obviously, I would give whatever a chance, but I would hope that they have some long-term vision about how all this will eventually come together. And to me, it doesn't seem like they have that yet. Unless I'm reading. What do you think?
Well, history would tell us that, they don't seem to make really in-depth plans for the way that the shows are going to be written out. I mean, maybe they have like a draft and they just polish it from episode to episode, but well, at least based on when actors find out they're going to be killed off, it seems like it happens kind of randomly.
Yeah, I don't know, and maybe some of it's a moving target where sort of some things start to unfold, and then they have these possible decisions that they make, and then they make them out of a series of possible endings or storylines. But I feel like this, just my personal opinion about this, is that unless they really think out how all this fits together, I'm going to be much like how Marvel does in terms of their Marvel universe and those storylines, which I'm not necessarily on board with all of those films, but I appreciate the fact that they are certainly trying to connect these disparate storylines in films because they're all part of the same franchise. Unless they're thinking about it in that way, I think I think people are already becoming a bit fatigued with this universe, and I think you're gonna see a lot of people basically stop watching, and they think that that's not a risk because this, even though the ratings are down, they're still the most robust ratings generally
on their network. Yeah,
correct. So
I don't necessarily agree that they need to all be linked. I see the value to that, and I see that's like a good way to have an end game, but this is a worldwide phenomenon, right? And so part of me wants to see what this is like, what's going on in the Walking Dead, mythology in other countries, and what it looks like. And maybe it's not going to be that interesting because it would look the same, just they'd be speaking a different language, but and with different architecture. But maybe there's a way that they can link it together, and I think perhaps the Andrew Lincoln movies will be a way to bridge the divide between the third show and everything else.
I don't necessarily need them to do sort of like a super involved link, but I do think that if you can do it at some point, not at all points necessarily, but to me, tying together the stories to a certain level makes sense. And people like those kinds of things, especially people who are fans really enjoy it when there's like these weird little crossover things. I honestly, despite some of my issues with what they've done with Morgan as the character and some of his weird decisions the things that they've done with him, I'm not always on board with, but it has been really fun to see him on Fear the Walking Dead, so that's kind of fun when you know who he's talking about. And I think, it would be great to see other parts of the world, not just the U.S. in this. In Canada, do they have nicer zombies? Or is it very different in Japan versus...
Nicer zombies? Come on, AJ.
I know.
I mean, we have been to Mexico. I guess maybe that was their, attempts at going overseas.
Yeah.
But they were just in, northern Mexico, which is basically Texas or Southern California anyway, so...
But I do think it would be interesting to see something else. And also maybe some other... even if you can't leave the U.S., maybe something in a different... we saw Los Angeles. New York is an obvious choice to me. But I definitely think, the UK or Europe. But I personally, and maybe this is just because we're reviewing Kingdom, but it would be really cool to see something going on overseas, like for much further overseas than just an entirely different culture.
I have a feeling that if they go to Europe, they're going to end up shooting in somewhere like Bratislava or Slovakia or Romania, one of these countries that has like good subsidies and it's really cheap to shoot there. Like a lot of shows end up getting shot out there, but then they can shoot there and make it like it is in Paris or something. You know?
Well, but we could also see them do. I mean, come on, like Korea is extraordinarily affordable to shoot in now, apparently, and they're getting a lot. They want to make films there, so that could be something cool.
Yeah.
I would love to see that, and I think there's an appetite for that. And then you make the franchise even more interesting to a worldwide audience, in my opinion. But
yeah. Speaking of which, I just saw a promo. It's in my queue now on Netflix. Is the Korean medieval zombie movie? Not to be confused with
that's
Kingdom.
been coming up.
I think it's called Rapture. It looks like costume wise.
Yeah.
It's these are period costumes, so it looks very similar.
Yeah. There's also something else that everybody keeps bothering me about. It's this Japanese zombie film that apparently they made on a budget. So maybe we should add that to the queue as well.
Always add it to the queue. However, let's get into Kingdom. I think you and I are intrigued enough that, of course, Walking Dead, unless things go really sideways, we're going to keep watching it because at the end of the day, it's still entertaining, with the exception of season 8 and 7.
Ugh, God.
And 6. 6 was okay. But yeah, we had a couple rough seasons there, but I'm definitely doubled down after what I've been seeing in the most recent Angela Kang season of Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And Fear the Walking Dead is in an interesting place now too, after the real 90-degree turn they did last season, but it ended in an interesting place. So I'm still on board with the franchise. I want to see him do more, and so sign me up.
Agreed. We're both going to continue watching. I mean, I don't think that's the question, and I suspect there's a lot of people who feel the same way, which is probably why they're deciding to go down this path.
Yeah, exactly. That's why the suit is very confident.
Yeah, they're like, we know. We've been following Reanimed's biting commentary.
Oh yes, sure.
Anyway, but anyway, let's get into our review recap of Kingdom, and these are the last 2 episodes, correct?
Yes, 5 and 6. They don't have names in this show. That's why we're just calling 5 and 6. But 5 is basically, if I had to boil it down, it's arriving in Sangju, I guess, what I would call this episode. That certainly is what ends up happening. But they also deal with the boat, which is kind of like this loose end out there.
Right, and we do have one witness, and this is sort of the beginning part of this episode is just sort of the survivors of the village, the Crown Prince, Shobi,
Muyong and Young Shin. But this is just our hero survivors, because other villagers did survive, and they were just told to go somewhere else.
Right, but this is just this little group, and there's also this weird tension because they don't know how far whatever this infection has spread. So there's definitely a lot of nervousness when night falls. And they are making their way to the village that Yunshin is apparently from. But there is also the added bonus of the Crown Prince's mentor, who we've seen a couple of times. And this is the, he's, what, is he an advisor? Is that what you would term him?
He was a member of the court. He was a counselor. He was just like the other high council people were at the beginning. So I think he's part of the rule. He's definitely one of the ruling aristocrats of the country, of the kingdom of Joseon. He's an ally of the ruling family, the Changs. Right, but he's very, very popular.
Yeah, and he's definitely nobility. So Lord, and he's a lord, Lord An Hyun, and so we've seen. Still makes me laugh. My
the fact that his name is so, when they say it, it sounds to me, my stupid ears, exactly the same as the capital of Joseon, Hanyang.
I know. Yeah,
and his name is Anyang.
Yeah,
without the H at the beginning.
But we've seen a little bit of him, but we've also seen enough of him to not be entirely sure whether to trust him or not, or whether there's something else going on. And
Yeah,
part of that
what
is
we
because
do know is that the Lord Cho was worried about him, or not worried about him, but other people are worried about him coming
Right.
to the aid of the Crown Prince.
Right, but Lord Cho seems to be very much not concerned about this at all, and in fact says he'll never attack. We don't have to worry about that aspect. So we definitely are viewing, or at least I was viewing, this particular character with a little bit of skepticism and wondering what the backstory is. And
Kind of like Muyang.
Yeah. But in any case, the group is making their way, and the sort of evening, Shobi makes the decision to go and dig for roots in the dark.
By torchlight.
Which
Very
is
strange.
like, she knows better than this, but I guess they kind of have to do this.
And they had said, we haven't seen any zombie guys in a while. Like, they don't know where the line of zombies is at this point, because you imagine it as like an ever-growing circle or something that starts in Dongnae and moves outwards. And they're moving inland. And they haven't seen any in a while. I think they do mention that. But still.
But even so, just given what they've been through, I think you got to have a little bit of PTSD related to going out on your own in the night. And so while she's there, we kind of have this bit of a jump scare because we see this figure kind of stalking her, and it comes out, and we don't see who it is. And big surprise, it is our favorite magistrate. So, and he is the lone survivor from the nobility boat.
He's just covered in blood.
Yeah, he's nasty, blood and dirt, and he looks very rough. And basically tells them what we already know has happened, which was that there was one of the infected on the boat. It killed everybody except for him.
The Crown Prince's reaction to him is kind of really on point, where he just kicks him and then puts his foot on his face until it just says everything that's happened. I was pretty happy about that.
Yeah, that was a pretty good move.
The Crown Prince has also been kind of beating himself up just before this scene about like, I didn't want to be like one of those people who lets everybody die, and I could have done more to save the people. And
I mean, he's feeling guilty because basically the whole reason that that little contingent of the Cho clan, the little assassin group of people that came after them, the Kingsguard, only were there because of him. So he has guilt because he feels like he caused these people's deaths, and all these people he worked so hard to save, and a lot of them died because of him. And, I get why he's feeling bad, but they are also saying it wouldn't have helped anyway because they would have just killed you. So, I hear both sides of it, basically.
Well, like the only reason... The reason that the Royal Guard are shooting to kill everybody inside that compound instead of trying to arrest him is that the last time he ran into Royal Guard with the Lord Cho's son at their head, he was just going to try and kill him, right? Lord Cho's son was like, I'm going to cut you now. I've got, now you're going to die. So self-defense, whatever, I mean, Lord Cho is all fired up because he's lost his only son, and that's understandable. But I'm still, obviously, Lord Cho is a bad guy, so of course I'm like, no, they don't have the right to just shoot arrows into a compound. And they killed the little cherub chubby cheek girl, which I'm never going to forgive them for.
Oh, I know. That was definitely the worst. It was horrible. And, but I think the Crown Prince, I don't think that, so basically everything that we see surrounding this whole storyline is that the nobility has no respect for the villagers. I don't think they really care who they kill.
No.
And if that means that they kill some of them off to get to the Crown Prince, they were going to do that regardless. So,
and as a treatise on leadership, we're watching the Crown Prince grow into his leadership skills and become a better leader. And part of that means beating yourself up when a bunch of people die who are under your control, or not under your control, but who you were leading.
Yeah, and it's also they're trying to show that he does have some empathy for the people in a way that obviously the Cho
nobody else does. Yeah. And the counterpoint to his leadership is the magistrate Bianpao, Cho Bianpao. And so when that guy shows up, you're like, all right, cool. We get to see how not to do it. And then I'm kind of glad that this guy lived. I was worried that we weren't going to see him again.
I know, because he is definitely a much needed sort of comic relief within this whole story. And there's also the discussion between the Crown Prince and Miyun to discuss Yunshin, and about whether or not they can count on him, whether they can trust him. There's a lot of discussion about how he got to be. I mean, the guy is a crack shot, which they have noted. And there's a lot of discussion about how they know that he must be an elite soldier, but
this
is
is
not.
pretty weak. This is a pretty weak part of the story. Like, he must be one of those elite Chaku soldiers, the ones who are trained to fight tigers. And they won't stop at anything, and they'll do anything to survive. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to. It's interesting because it's like, I feel like they're trying to build some distrust between him and the crown prince. And
by the end of episode 6, I am fairly convinced that, the show wants me to think that it's young Sheen is the mole.
Right.
He'll do anything to survive. He doesn't really like An Hyang.
Right, but come on. Like, who would you really think would be the mole? There's only one person who's really out to save his own skin, and it's the magistrate guy. Come on, there's even though they're trying really hard, it still seems weak.
I just don't think he knew what their plans were. Or maybe he did. I don't know.
I think he did, but anyway, Lord On, and then we also see Lord On, like, this whole thing about the disease spreading. And, Lord On does not seem surprised when he hears about these rumors about the dead coming back to life. Not surprised at all, so that tells you something. And there's this whole sort of, not disparate storylines, but we see a little bit of Lord On and his men going to, like, they hear rumors about this happening, and they go out to kind of find out what's happening.
His men? You mean the Burlap Brigade?
Yes. Or whatever they are.
I love the costuming here. I assumed that he was going to be the only one dressed like that because he was in mourning.
Yeah.
But he makes all of his men dress like him, so they're all wearing like sackcloth. It's pretty cool.
And it's to bring these two together, and they're all basically going to explore this boat which is the plague boat. And there's like a super weird scene where the crown prince, and his merry band come upon this village, and you have to remember that everybody's starving at this point, and this village is basically throwing this crazy festival. Everybody seems like they're gonna be feasting. There's some crazy dancing on swords that's super creepy to watch.
Oh, that's that's in Sangju.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, that's two different scenes because
there's
the villagers in what they call the slash and burn farm, which whatever that means.
Oh, sorry,
they're eating the pig from the boat.
They're eating the pig. So anyway, these villagers are eating the pig. They basically threaten them with death unless they tell them what happened, and they basically admit that they looted the boat. So they go to try to find the boat.
Yeah, they take them out through the tall grass, like where you expect velociraptors to live.
Oh my gosh! And they, and they, of course, there's this moment when they're asking what happened to the bodies on the boat, and they said, "Oh, we buried them in this field." And it, by them choosing to do this, it creates a very super crazy little scene.
Yeah, so that's basically the culmination of this episode. But we also do have more scenes of Lord An Hyang. Oh gosh, the good guy Lord. We think maybe. Getting news that the zombies are coming, and he jumps up, and his men are all following him, and there's a festival going on, and there's rumor in the city about like a terrible disease, but they have no actual details. They're talking about headless ghosts. They have this seer woman, like you said, dancing on these swords. It looks like wow. That's some bed of nails type stuff. There's a little kid painting charms in cinnabar, and that they're selling for 10 bun to the peasants, and so this is the show is showing us news has spread that something terrible is on its way. Nobody knows what to do about it, so they're turning to religion. So that's always a big feather in the cap of religion. Yep.
Well, and it's also interesting just even in thinking about communication methods. So rumors. So where are the rumors coming from? Probably from people traveling. Like, we don't have, the sort of one communication method that we've seen over distance has been like smoke signals, basically.
Right, yeah.
There isn't a lot of that stuff going on. So you have to think, well, what, these are how do rumors travel? And it's like a game of telephone. And when people don't know how to make sense of things, they try to fill in the gaps and when they don't understand things, often supernatural or other, mysticism and religion plays parts in these kinds of things. And, they're used to, like, for example, like when the Black Death was happening, people would, again, turn to religion and, like, basically be like, oh, this can protect me, or they would buy charms similarly to, so it's all, like, very much sort of this, I don't want to call it a game of telephone, but that's kind of how it feels. And it has to be super terrifying if you don't actually know what's happening, and yet you have these scary rumors that you can make no sense of, sort of making their way across all these little towns. And if you're a peasant in some of these towns, man, like you're already starving. So what recourse do you have at this point? So now that in addition to the famine, you've got some kind of plague happening.
Yeah. What a combo.
Right. It's going to be like, so that I thought that they played that pretty well, just in showing how the lack of information could be just as terrifying, although in this case probably not, but just as terrifying as what is actually happening, because you just don't really know how to process or manage that. Because really, what can you do? You have no money, you have no food. How do you fight a zombie plague or a headless ghost? You know what I mean? So
well, we'll find out.
Yep.
So Lord An Hyang has also gone out to the boat because one of his burlap scouts has gone out there and found it. And then they look around. He's like, who could have done this? But you can tell that he sort of has an idea. So he's now tracking the boat situation. We know that the Crown Prince and his crew is tracking now, with the villagers being taken to where the burial happened. You have that awesome fight scene where it really, I mean, there's like 50 zombies and only our 4 heroes, or five, I guess, if you count the governor who's just holding a headless corpse in front of him as a shield.
As a shield, yep.
There's some great choreographed fight scenes here. I really love the different fighting style between the Crown Prince and Yangshin, the way that Yangshin's always jumping around and whacking people with like little knives, and the Crown Prince is using like, I don't know what fighting style, but big sword fighting style. And he seems really accomplished. And it's a really fun scene to watch. The choreography is good. The cinematography is good. The lighting, the tall grass is terrifying.
Oh, yeah. And it's you can't see so much. And I thought this was one of, I mean, as we said, there were some really great set pieces across this whole series. This was definitely one of my favorites for many reasons, but also for what you just pointed out. You get to see the different fighting styles of our troop of heroes highlighted in very specific ways. And also the cowardice of the magistrate. He just, they're in the middle of this super intense scene, and he's just funny no matter what scene they put him in.
Because his face, he has a great
amazing.
face he has a great face. And Sylvie saves his life again. The fight is going poorly. There's a slow motion scene which makes you realize that when the Crown Prince looks up and sees these guys are doing okay, but the zombies just keep like rising up in waves and running at them. And so you're like, well, this doesn't look like it's going to go okay. But we already knew that Lord An Hyang was on his way. And then his guys do show up with a flurry of, I don't know if this is the best tactic, a flurry of burlap, but also a wave of arrows that they just kind of fire into the fracas.
Yeah.
Like Muyong is fighting a dude and arrows punch into the body of the guy that he's fighting. And I'm like, wow, but for a spin in the throes of combat, and Muyong would have been the one impaled on that. But so it doesn't go that way. Obviously, this is a good guy savior moment. So TV tropes don't allow for good guys to get killed by other good guys. I'm pretty sure. And so they sweep in, save the day. The Burlap Brigade are very practiced at fighting zombies. They're like using scythes, and once the zombie is down, they drag him immediately into a fire, or it seems like that's what's going on. And there's a beautiful scene where An Hyang and the Crown Prince stare at each other over the the battlefield for a moment.
Yep, for one long moment.
It does seem like really there's a lot going on in that look. Like, wow, these guys mean a lot to each other. And it actually isn't the end of the episode. It feels like that's a climactic moment, but the episode continues from there with the Crown Prince's party going back to Lord An Hyang's home, his residence, and his hometown, as he puts it later on. And Young and Silby are making argument, or Young especially is making an argument like we shouldn't trust Lord Anyang, and the Crown Prince doesn't want to hear it.
Correct. And, we've seen a couple flashbacks. We see why the Crown Prince trusts him. Because basically, when he was a kid, this was his only ally in the palace, or felt like it was his only ally in the palace. And so he does have a reason to trust him, because basically this is the guy who kept saying, stay alive, you have a lot of enemies, watch your back. And so he's not willing to entertain the idea that he could be a traitor, and cuts off any kind of talk. So, and I'll admit, I was like, man, are you naive? But, later we find out that his trust is not misplaced. So,
because of a TV trope, I think known as the unspoken plan guarantee.
Correct.
Where if you don't know about it, that means it's bound to succeed. Mm-hmm. We also have a scene of Lord Cho back in Hanyang running an experiment on prisoners, where he feeds one of them tainted meat, zombie meat, and watches them change and then attack the other guy. And he's like, okay. And then he expositions for a minute, like, okay, so if they eat the tainted meat, they become the zombie. In his creepy monotonal way of speaking. You don't really know what he's going to do with that information. He just says, well, he does say, he's like, that makes it uncontrollable. And then he basically mobilizes the 5 armies. But at the end of this episode, we also have him putting his daughter on the throne as Queen Regent.
Yep.
In a scene in this episode, just solidifying power and setting things up for the Cho clan to kind of do what seemed inevitable from the first episode, frankly, which is take over.
It's interesting, just the dynamic between him and his daughter, because we have a few multiple scenes where she gets a little bit like, I don't know, between her and her dad, that are basically she's trying to throw her weight around, and he continually says, well, you're only there because I put you there and I can take you down easily enough. And this is like, it was interesting to me how many times they chose to show this. Real
paternal. I think you know what that means is that eventually.
Yeah, yes, I know, but it just seemed to be very.
There's going to be some father, daughter action. We don't know which way it's going to go. It probably is going to go her way because he's put her on the throne. Mm-hmm. And she seems like a real conniving young lady.
Yes, she does. So anyway, I just think it's like, is it really necessary to show this multiple times? Well, I guess they felt it was.
You know what I could use multiple times in this show is more maps. It's kind of hard for me to figure out, like, this province that Sangju is in, it's got like 18 syllables. I think it's like, no, I'm not even going to try. But it's basically like the southeastern corner of the Korean peninsula, I think.
I think so. It's hard to tell. I agree. I think it would be nice to see a little bit more of that to get a better sense of the distance.
For those of us with terrible Korean geography knowledge, like he rattles off a bunch of cities that they're going to blockade or like choke points or something. And I think there's a map showing, at one moment, there's a map showing the area of this state that he's decided to cut off, and that's what his daughter is questioning him about. She's like, hey, we get a lot of tribute and tithes, levies from this state. Is it really a good idea to like let it all get destroyed by the zombie plague?
Right.
He's like, no, I mean, that's actually in the next episode, isn't it?
It is, but I mean, I think they all kind of combine, so I think we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, so the thing is that all these cities with the nobility, they basically live off of the things that the peasants give them, that tributes and tithes and whatever you want to call them. And the reason why all of the peasants are starving is because they basically have been giving everything to the nobility, which is part of what is causing all the tension. And so she's not incorrect, because basically she knows that there's not all that much out there anyway. And the only reason that they are doing so well is because of all these tributes. So she's not, I think this is a logical thing to point out and ask a question about. But
what about his counterpoint, though, where he's like, that's not true power. True power is putting bodies in a pond.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know about that point. No, putting bodies in a pond and people ignore it.
Yeah, making people think that the number of bodies in this pond is 0, that is true power. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, like clearly you've got true power over just the people who work for you then.
Right,
And it can't really extend much beyond that because nobody else knows about it.
Right. That was kind of a weird thing, but okay.
Just him being evil and cryptic.
Yeah. Little mustache twirly there. But yeah, so we've got that sort of power struggle going on.
Another important scene that starts in this, like, it's weird that this storyline starts so late in the show, but Moo Young's wife is introduced in a scene in this episode where she's with like a dozen pregnant women and they're eating and they're like, oh, who would take care of a bunch of pregnant ladies this nicely? And you're obviously just like, oh no, what terrible thing is going to happen to Moo Young's wife?
Well, I think that this has been hinted at many times, just with some of the weird, ominous music that has played every time they discuss it. But the discussion surrounding the queen, the queen, and what, whether she has a boy child or a female child, like that. Mm-hmm. Clearly, she's going to have a son, whether she makes it up or not. But there is definitely, like, every time they mention it, there's this ominous music that chimes in. So something bad's going to happen. And so, yeah, we know that there's probably a nefarious reason why they are taking care of these women. And they make a point to say that Moo Young's wife is of a different class. They don't know why she's there. And she says something like, oh, my husband didn't want me to be worry about stuff, so he told me to stay here while he was away. And they have had him talk about, that he has mentioned his wife even from the first episode, because part of why he was a bit in trouble with the prince was because he was stealing food for her, because she was pregnant. And so we do know that we knew these little bits, but now we finally see her. And you're right, like, it's weird that we see her so late in the series.
In retro, it's like, it's enough. It's just that it's weird that it suddenly comes up. Like, introducing a brand new character in the second to last episode of the season, it seems a little odd, but why she's there is expounded upon in the next episode. And what they're doing a lot of actual setting up for season 2 in these couple of episodes, which is quite interesting. Like talking about the mole in the prince's entourage, but never exposing who they are throughout the end of this season. Introducing Moo Young's wife and exposing the plot, the baby plot, whatever you want to call that. So it's kind of cool that they're doing a lot of work to set up season 2, like not just in the last 30 seconds of the final episode, but throughout the show. Certainly in these last 2 episodes.
Right.
Let's move on to episode 6.
Okay.
I think, right? That's about everything.
Yep.
So we have the 5 armies have shown up, and in a way that was pretty aggressive. They've like knocked people over, raised a flag, shot a guy with an arrow, cut another guy's head off or something. Mm-hmm. It all seemed a little unnecessary, frankly.
Right. I mean, they're kind of intimidating enough without doing that. But okay.
The governor of Sangju is not really a cool guy, it turns out. So when the royal guard shows up to arrest Lord Cho, we have this showdown where Lord An-hyung appears to sell him out with a smile on his face, and you're like, oh, that dastardly Lord An-hyung. Moo Young was right to distrust him. We've also had the scene with Young Shin leaving the compound of Lord An-hyung and going to the cemetery and the site of the battle, which the subtitles tell us was actually, this monument is to Lord An-hyung, where he defeated 30,000 Japanese with 500 soldiers. We assume that this is part of Young Shin's background, where he was one of those 500, perhaps, and he's from a village called Samyang, which might have been lepers. We're not sure, and they all appear to be dead now, and it's like a little cemetery. So that's as much of Young Shin's background as we get, other than Lord An-hyung talks to one of his burlap guys later on, and he's like, "Oh, that's the guy from Samyang I was telling you about." And then the crown prince is like, "Do you know him?" And he's like, "No, I've never met him." So. Little bit of untrustworthiness there going on.
Yep.
But early on in this episode, Lord An-hyung is totally trustworthy because of the unspoken plan. They end up shooting a bunch of royal guard. Crown Prince is not arrested. It's all good. And that's kind of just the way that goes. It's pretty cool. I like the way that scene unfolded. Burlap Squad shows up with their bows and arrows, and it's great.
That Burlap Squad is pretty good.
They do good work. The magistrate gets fired by the crown prince. He's like, I'm going to take over Sangju. You're not worthy to lead the city, because he's like, I don't want to let in these peasants from the south. Basically, the north, they cannot go north because the five armies are not going to let them out of the city. But they still have a southern border to defend, I guess. Right? Is that your understanding too of the geography?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they take in the people who are fleeing in front of the zombies, but no zombies are showing up yet. It's still daytime, and then they come up with this plan to defend the city.
Right, and the prince is definitely integral in this. This group that has already fought them basically are the ones that are coming up with these ideas. Though again, clear that Lord On knows what this is or has seen this before. So that's. But you basically, it's a little. I don't want to call it a montage scene, but it is a little bit of a preparatory scene where you see them all getting ready to defend the city.
Yeah, they come up with choke points. There is a scene. There's a quick shot of a map with like circles around areas. The crown prince knows to use things like wetlands and rivers. He's like they don't like to come out during the day, and they're afraid of the elements, which is a cool way of putting it too, because they don't like water or fire, I guess. Although they don't seem to have a problem with fire, do they? Like we've seen a scene of one of them on fire, still running after people. So maybe they're not actually scared of fire, but they are scared of water. So he's using water, he's using choke points, and that I love seeing good guys think about stuff this way, And we've seen that from the get-go with the Burlap Squad. They are like, we know how to do things. We're not stupid.
And they have signal fires that they can set off if they have any sort of sight.
They seem to have layers of defense too, right?
Right. And then also, sort of simultaneously while this is going on, we have a scene with Nurse Shobi and the magistrate, and it is kind of, it's like she's so frustrated by him that it's pretty entertaining. But basically, he thinks he's all like helping her out, and actually brings back all these things that are not helpful at all, and she gets really pissed off at him, and she's like, I'm gonna go out and get this on my own. And again, she seems to show like, I guess you have to view it as being courageous, but it's like she's going off and doing this stuff because she's trying to nurse people and get this medicine together and all that.
Specifically the crown prince, right? She's like, his wound hasn't healed. She's worried about some wound he has. I don't know if this is going to come back to be a plot point in season 2, but it doesn't seem to have been a problem for him.
Done anything to him.
Yeah.
But she's very concerned about it, and so the magistrate has brought back all the wrong stuff, and she's like, well, I will go and find this, and stumbles, and, he's chasing after her, and she basically tells him what a coward he is all the time. They stumble across the sort of, the valley where this snowflower grows, which is obviously the zombie plant that they've been talking about this whole time. And there's all sorts of stuff set up. So we know that there has been knowledge of this. So there's all sorts of stuff set up almost as like an early warning system. And this is, I think this is kind of terrifying. Just so she and the magistrate go in, she finds the plant, but she sees all these things that are indicative that somebody knows what's happening here. What did you think of this? I thought this was like very eerie.
It's a good set. It's also interesting that this is the second location in this show called Frozen Valley. At least it was in the subtitles. But this is the real Frozen Valley where they actually find the resurrection flower. Yeah. So that's kind of cool. Something else that we haven't talked about, I think, during our entire recap or review of this whole show is how cold it appears to be on set.
Yep.
Like their breath is constantly billowing out of their mouths. Yeah. Unless that's done in post, it's freezing cold when they're shooting this. Yeah. Yeah. And it has been since the beginning. Like every scene, I feel like just about even when they're inside, their breath has been like crazy. Maybe not in Hanyang, but it's certainly in Julhyun and Dongne. Yep. There are always scenes where they're just like it looks like they're shooting at night. And it's freezing, and these actors, I feel bad for them.
And they have nothing but their little silk outfits to keep them warm.
Yeah.
Hopefully they had some heat tech on underneath. I don't know, but man, I was thinking the same thing, is that this must have been a very tough filming if it's as cold as it seems.
I mean,
like
they're
it must
shooting
be.
right now, right? So February in
Yeah,
Korea,
it's
in
pretty
South
cool.
Korea is probably pretty cold too. But yeah, so that's been like a cool element because I think back to watching The Terror, which I don't know if you've ever seen still.
Yes, I think I have.
Ciarán Hinds, the boat one about the
Oh, yeah,
Arctic
yeah,
path,
yeah.
the finding the Northwest Passage. That
Yes.
film was apparently shot in, that show was shot in Eastern Europe, all on sets, not actually in the Arctic Circle, which you might be surprised to discover that they don't want to shoot a show there. But you almost never see their breath in that show,
Right.
because I mean, I don't know how you do that, but fake unless you like freeze the studio. But so
Right.
this has added a level of authenticity to me that I respect.
So we have like these two storylines going on, all these preparations, and I think we should also say that the other bit of drama in this last episode has to do when we go back to the Queen and Lord Cho. The whole storyline with the babies becomes clear and
Yep.
evil.
Yeah.
And
Super bad.
right. So we have these three storylines kind of clashing into each other, or at least being sort of not, I wouldn't say wrapping up, but sort of leaves us at a cliffhanger to jump into the next season, which can't come out soon enough, in my opinion.
No, seriously.
But there's this whole storyline with the Queen, and there's been like a serving girl that saw her handmaiden burning her clothes and is gossiping a little bit too loudly about it, and then gets brought in to serve the Queen, even though she's not been trained to do any of this. And voila, the Queen is not pregnant. And we also see another scene where one of the pregnant women that have been sort of being cared for goes into labor, and there's this really creepy scene where they go to supposedly help her with the birth, and then she is killed and her baby is killed, and,
Well,
because it is a
not
girl.
on camera.
Not on camera, but there's a lot of blood.
There's so much blood.
And I guess the thing is, it's like, my only thought about this is like, why does it matter? You could just let them go and the others will never find out. They'll just think that you're caring for these women in the way that you say that you are.
Yeah, right?
Like, if the goal is to steal a boy child, wouldn't it be better to just
Not murder
say, okay,
12 people?
go on your merry way with your girl child, and then nobody else is going to be questioning. And there's a pretty brutal cleanup scene where there's like a lot of blood and, dun dun dun. And then the reveal scene where the Queen is not pregnant. She's been basically having a pillow under her outfits, which you're able to do because these outfits are quite big. And so, there's not, you can kind of hide this, at least, I guess, by putting a pillow under you for a long time.
What's your understanding of the soiled clothes, the blood on the clothes and burning it? Why are they doing that? Is it because that's like menstrual blood and she shouldn't be having a period? But why is it on her shoes? Is that just because medieval times that was how that went?
I guess so, but I mean, in this case, it's really because it came from one of the king's victims, I thought.
She notices it while the king is eating somebody. But I was still just
Right.
like, all right, I don't understand why they have to burn it and why then that becomes this plot point.
I think the plot point is that she was probably actually having her period, and she wasn't supposed to because she's supposed to be pregnant.
I guess, yeah, they don't really spell it out.
So they're trying to, they don't spell it out, but I thought that that's what they were trying to show.
Or that I thought maybe she had miscarried. Turns out, though, that she doesn't look like she's ever been pregnant.
Right. Which means there's no direct line to the throne for her family unless they make one up, which is what they are trying to do with our little group of married pregnant women. And so that's kind of where we leave things in the big kingdom. They're shut down, trying to come up with an heir, from this group of women who are not really empowered. They're just kind of under the control of the kingdom now. And then we've also got our intrepid heroes. Just basically, they have survived through the morning. There's been no sighting of the infected. Of the resurrections this horde has not come down in a wave upon them, which is what they were anticipating, and they all breathe a sigh of relief.
They almost do, and then the horse shows up, and you're like, "Oh, we had scouts out." I'm like, "God, what a crap job!"
I know.
What do you really need
the
scouts
worst job.
for?
Right. And So they all start to kind of disband their posts and their ideas that they're going to, okay, well, we'll take this down and we'll rest for a night. And then
for a
all hell
day.
breaks loose. Yeah.
But yeah. So the criticism I have here is that they've seemed to have their stuff together. They've been so prepared, and then when it becomes extremely clear that the zombie horde is charging towards them in the light
They fall apart.
in the light of day, they all just stand there, in front of the gates. They're not pushing their boats back out into the water. They're all just standing there like, what the what? And
Yeah.
then the show ends with them all standing there as the zombies are breaking out of the tree line and charging down upon them. So next season is going to start with a heck of a battle, I guess. That's great. Another thing that has happened is Lord Cho has shown up at Sangju to like watch to see what's happening, and he has apparently a zombie in a box with him, which we'll see what he has planned for that. It could be the king. We don't know. We haven't seen the king, certainly, in several episodes.
The other big reveal here with them sort of coming upon them, it's now sunlight. They always thought it was the dawn that put them away, and they make the comment, oh no, it wasn't the sunlight, it was the heat, and now it's winter, so they're all screwed. But the thing that I thought was weird about this was what you just pointed out about the fire, because they don't shy away from the fire. They just kind of run through it or run around being set on fire.
Yeah.
Nobody, like, at least I didn't see anything like that happening.
That one scene with the fire, it was a zombie pushed into the fire and then it just keeps running around. They haven't shown us a wall of fire yet.
Right, that's true, but you would think that if they showed it running around that others would run away from it because it's heat,
right.
But I don't know. In any case, that was a little plot point that bothered me slightly because we've seen things where I think you're right. We have not seen some sort of like a conflict. We haven't seen like a huge like bonfire or anything and what that might do.
Yeah. I don't know what average winter temperatures are in Sangju, but where I live, which is not a cold place, the coldest part of the day is dawn. Like usually that's where we hit our low, and then the temperature steadily climbs all day.
Right.
So it would be interesting to see if at like noon, if the zombies suddenly go back into dormant mode or not. Maybe not. Maybe it's way colder in that part of Korea than where I am in California. Obviously, I think just about everywhere is colder than here. But.
Right. I was also wondering if they're doing this mythology something to do with the elements because they can't deal with water. Although it's only water if they like actually get into it, they just sink. And now there's the fire element. So I'm wondering if they're trying to come up with something like that. So we'll see maybe in the next series. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this whole thing. It was fun to watch. I really recommend this. I've been recommending it to a bunch of my friends to watch.
The acting has been just stellar. I'd say especially with regards to the Crown Prince. His just like he doesn't do a lot. He's a pretty like understated actor, but is just what he's able to convey with his face and his eyes alone is great. Moo Young, his buddy Moo Young is awesome. The Governor Byung Pao is hilarious in a tragic way, and Seobi is good. Young Shin is a great physical actor, and physical like choreography wise. So just in that little core cast, there's so much fun to watch, and I've really enjoyed it too.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, and your villains are very villainy. So
they sure are.
I mean, they really are. And so this has been so much fun to watch this. And honestly, like, I'm kind of like, guys, hurry up and finish filming. So, we're going to have to wait a bit. I know.
Yeah. There was a piece of news in the Wikipedia article about this show that each episode went over budget and ended up costing more than $1 million, and that also a member of the production had died, apparently from overwork. But they were in like the art department or something. Like we're talking post production. Apparently, the rush to get this show done.
Killed someone. Oh my gosh. So let's not hope that it rushes then.
Yeah, I think we should let them take their time.
Agreed.
But I would, if anybody from the production ever hears this, I want to tell them that I don't think that they went over budget. I think they hit it on the head because everything from a production point of view, this show is hitting all the right notes for me.
Oh, I think this is one of the most impressive pieces of work that have come out in years, honestly. And I'm not shocked to hear that each episode costs that much because it looks like it costs that much. I mean, you're basically talking about almost a feature film length in every episode.
Yeah.
So if you think about the amount of editing that must have taken place and the amount of film and just even the choreography, every single episode has at least like 2 major set pieces. So, I mean, this is impressive work, and I fully support it, but I don't support people dying from overwork.
No.
So I hope they take their time. But I would love to see more of this. This is really amazing, and just such a pleasure to watch.
And so I guess with that, we'll put Kingdom to bed until next year or whenever the season 2 comes out, which we will gladly consume ravenously.
Definitely.
And in the meantime, HA and I...
We will talk about something that is not so high budget.
Well, I have no idea, because as you know, I have not had the opportunity to see it, but we're going to next review Anna and the Apocalypse. We're going to take a trip to Bonnie, Scotland, right? Isn't that where it is?
Correct.
And also back in time to Christmas, because that's just how theaters work. So join us again next time on Reanimated. And in the meantime, you can get in touch with us on all the usual suspects. Twitter, ReanimatedPcast. Email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. And online at reanimatedpodcast.com. And so come back next time. We'll be hitting up Anna and the Apocalypse. And then we're going to probably head back to The Passage, I think, after we're done with that. So, yeah, we've got lots of good content. It's a good winter for zombies.
Indeed. So until next time, ciao.
Alrighty, bye-bye. Thanks for listening.